Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today on a topic that has been generating a lot of interest and is certainly something very close to my heart. It is how to develop a compliance strategy for your expansion into the US. So as an introduction, my name is Kevin Shinners. I head up the international business, so the business outside of the Americas for A-LIGN or A-LIGN, depending on where you are, how you like to describe it. For those of you who don't know who A-LIGN are, we are one of the largest cybersecurity auditors in the world. So we have over 6,000 clients globally. We are the largest SOC 2 issuer in the world, which is a big part of what we're doing today. We issue an awful lot of certifications for ISO 27001, ISO 42001 now from an AI perspective. We're top 3 from a US federal perspective as well for both FedRAMP and CMMC. So we do a lot of cybersecurity. And in the area that I work in our international business, we are seeing more and more companies who are looking to expand into the US. And a consequence of expanding into the US is a plethora of different things that you need to adhere to from a cybersecurity perspective. So we're going to walk through a few of those today. And with me, I am ably assisted by Eric Lister. Eric, would you like to introduce yourself and what your job is in A-LIGN?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Good morning. Glad to be here. Hopefully today you'll learn about all the compliance solutions that we do offer at A-LIGN, like Kevin mentioned, but more importantly, offer you some information on how you can provide and approach your company's security to provide any sort of requirements that your customers need. But thanks for that offer of introduction, Kevin. My name is Eric Lister. I do lead the SOC practice here at A-LIGN, which covers SOC 1, SOC 2, HIPAA, and Microsoft SSPA, a myriad of other things we also offer, but mainly for the topic of conversation this morning, those are the 4 main areas that we see related to requirements in the US. So happy to be here, Kevin, and hopefully we can offer some insight into how to expand in the US successfully.
Perfect. Thank you, Eric. So yeah, as I said, one of the biggest things that we see is rarely is a company looking to stay in one region. Specifically, when you're looking at software companies, the idea is to grow, expand, and obviously attribute more revenues to other regions. So for a lot of companies starting out in Europe or starting out in APAC, the intent at some stage is to grow into the US market as well, to grow their wallet share. A big part of doing that is proving your ability to be cybersecurity aware for these companies. So obviously, in a lot of cases, they're giving you their data. Their expectation is, how are you keeping my data secure in a variety of different ways? In Europe and in Asia, in particular, the most common framework is ISO 27001. The certification, it's very standardized. It's what people would expect you to have. The reality is, if you want to do business in the US, more often than not, 9 times out of 10, they will not be looking for ISO 27001. They will be looking for something else. There may be overlaps, there may be correlations with ISO 27001 or another international framework, but the reality is, more often than not, that they want to attribute their own certifications, their own attestations, and use those instead. We see this an awful lot from our client base outside of the US, who often come to us panicking because they have a big client that they're ready to sign and the client wants to go with them, but they've asked for a SOC 2 report, or they've asked for different reports that they don't currently have today, or they want to go into a different part of the market, whether it's into the Department of Defense or something else. They're a large healthcare company, they want to look at confidential data, and there are consequences to doing that. So you have this threshold that people work towards. One is a very binary one. If you want to work with the federal government, you have to have certain qualifications in place, which we'll go through later on. The others, which are like SOC 2, are more optional. You may not be required to do it today, but if you choose not to, then you're probably going to get a 250 question questionnaire walking through diligently all the capabilities that you have and the proof points that you have that your software and your company are quote unquote secure. That's clearly not a scalable solution. As you try and sell to more and more companies, having more and more of those questionnaires, having more and more of that time, effort, resources being drained, filling these things out doesn't make an awful lot of sense. So what a lot of people look to do is they look to try and streamline their sales process. So we're in a very lucky position to have a very big client base, and we bring our clients to us, and they speak at our conferences. And last year, so the start of 2024, we had 3 of our CISOs that work with us join, and they were talking about themselves almost as being cost centers. We must meet these obligations. We're required to do these things by law. It's very much a mundane task. The interesting thing was this year, we brought Synthesia in the UK, we brought Butterfly Networks, and we brought DocuSign. And every one of those were talking about themselves as being sales enablers. They were looking at what additional frameworks do we want to sell into, because we want to sell into a new geography or a new industry we haven't sold into in the past. And they were working lockstep with their sales teams, go-to-market teams, on what are those, I suppose, resources that they would need to have in place to allow them to shorten those sales cycles and ultimately help the company to sell more and make more revenue. So as you look to move into the US, a lot of these things start to be uncovered. A lot of these things start to be peeled back. And unfortunately, there's a bit of work involved. But the good thing is it's not as much work as you may originally think or you may originally expect, especially if you have ISO 27001. I suppose if you look at the risks of not having this compliance plan, there are other things that can happen. I suppose, Eric, if you want to kind of elaborate on that in a bit more detail as to what are the risks involved if a company doesn't look and doesn't keep looking to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. First of all, your first topic on that was a good one, and I think I'll reiterate it. Moving into the U.S. with an RFP, trying to get new business. Of course, SOC 2, SSPA, HIPAAs, those are very important for whatever kind of type of business that you're performing to show that you do have that good security posture. But thinking about that as a sales enablement, like you said, it's a great proactive way to not only save time on potential requests and questionnaires per se, like you've mentioned, but also it's a proactive way to almost use it as a marketing tool. It's not that, but it could be used where if you are between 2 or 3 competitors and a company sees that you have a SOC 2, it can only help their understanding of your security posture as a company. Additionally, it could be a negative if you don't have one. So if they're in consideration between 2 or 3 different service providers, you're not providing a SOC 2, not that you're not doing great work security-wise, but we just don't have that report to show them. So it's very important to have those reports, and you can kind of stand on your security environment there that you're providing. But moving into the US, a SOC 2 and a SOC 1 are very important to have, and they're really kind of the baseline. They're the foundation. The good thing about them is that we will get into this a little bit more in detail later, but they are somewhat customizable. SOC 2 definitely has a prescribed style of showing how we achieve the security between the 5 trust service criteria, but we can add, mix and match between those service criteria to fit your needs and what your company provides other users. A SOC 1 is much more customizable with our business processes and control objectives. So all of those are a great foundation for the US market. And I think one of the strongest points of the SOC is that you can tailor it not only to your security environment, but also any sort of kind of usage that your clients and users need to see. So I think that's really something to keep in mind as we move into the SOC frameworks and the idea of creating a SOC report for your own company.
Yeah, and actually one of the things that you said there to start with I suppose the advancement of AI, one of the things we are starting to hear now in terms of RFIs and RFPs is there are AI bots that are scraping company websites looking for focused names and focused phrases to show that they have a certification or attestation in place to create a shortlist to bring into the RFP cycle. And obviously, if you do not demonstrate that, and you cannot demonstrate that, and to your point, if you've a competitor who has and does and is showing and has proof points that they have one of these certifications or attestations in place, then the time to market for them to work with that company has reduced considerably. So there's a lot of other elements involved in this as well as we go through it. we've talked about lots of different things here already in terms of why people need to do this and why you should look at this to try and streamline your business and streamline your growth into the US market. To get a bit more specific and a bit more precise, there are a number of main American frameworks. I say main or major because there are lots more, but we wanted to focus and highlight some of the more common ones that we see, the reasons that they're more common, and the reasons you may or may not have heard of these things in the past. And then we'll spend a bit more time specifically on SOC 2 because it is by far and away the largest of them. But there's a couple of other moving parts right now as well that we wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of because they are creating all manner of confusion and uncertainty in the market right now. So as I mentioned at the very start, we are a top 3 federal assessor. What that means is if people want to do business with the US federal government, they need to have a qualified assessor in place to meet the pretty stringent and significant terms and conditions laid out by the US federal government to do business with that. The first of those, the biggest one of these, is called FedRAMP. So FedRAMP, think of it as, in a nice way, think of this as the ability for clients, i.e. companies or subsidiaries of the US federal government, to go to a marketplace. And within that marketplace, they can pick and choose the software components that they would like to do business with. Each one of these software components has already been pre-approved. So there's no additional requirements needed. They've been pre-approved because this marketplace is called the FedRAMP marketplace. It's where federally authorized companies can promote their capabilities and their software so that different elements of the US federal government can then purchase that. This is the big brother of all the regulations. This is a very, very big task to do. This is a lot of work to do. We have done an awful lot of these in the past. But this is something which a lot of companies, especially larger established companies that are looking to sell significant capabilities into the US federal government, will have to go with that. And this is a much more of a mandated route if you want to do business with the US federal government. In terms of mandates, the little brother beside it called CMMC, this is really focused on manufacturing companies anywhere around the world who are looking to do business with the Department of Defense in the US. There are, depending on what you read, about 80,000 companies in scope for this, about 2,000 of which are actually outside of the US. So there's a lot of companies who are now in a position that they have to do this. A couple of weeks ago, a notification went out that by the 10th of November, any company that wants to do business with the US federal government from a manufacturing perspective must be CMMC certified. So this is creating an awful lot of concern. At the moment, there's a lot of people who are fast tracking their CMMC certifications through. And once again, because we're one of the top 3, we're in a very, very strong position to do this. In general, there's less than probably about 80 assessors out there for CMMC. So do the math. It's a lot of companies that need to get this in a very quick basis. So that's the current one that's creating an awful lot of traction. Eric, did you want to go through the other 3 badges that we're seeing here as well?
Yeah, that'd be great, Kevin. I appreciate that. So starting on the top here, top right, HIPAA. HIPAA in the US, if you're not familiar with it, it's a law passed in the 90s related to protect personal health information. So you'll probably hear the acronym if you're diving into that world of PHI. If you do anything along the lines of PCI with credit cards or anything like that, you've also heard personally identifiable information, which is PII. Very similar concept. The whole point of a HIPAA assessment, though, is to protect and provide information to users that their PHI, which is health information, is protected. So there's a various different set of rules used for HIPAA, but the main point is outside of like a SOC 1 and SOC 2, which is also focused on data security, the HIPAA assessment is focused on data security, specifically protecting that PHI, which is the health information. So protects the privacy, it secures the data of that information of all clients. If you are a healthcare provider, if you're a hospital, what it does basically is, grants your patients' rights. It standardizes kind of the security procedures and the safeguards for the full life cycle of data. So your storage of data, how it's stored, where it's stored, the transmission of it. So if it's between clinics, if it's between, you think of different service providers, and ultimately the processing of data. So it is still focused on the security overall of the data and information, but it's more focused on the individuals and the PHI related to those individuals. There are some different nuances for HIPAAs. If you're a covered entity, if you're a business associate or something like that, that's something we can walk you through whenever you decide to approach that. But really, it's the safeguarding of information around the PHI. The HITRUST is more of a security framework that's focused more in depth than the other SOC 1 and SOC 2. So what a HITRUST is really what we like to say is it focuses on the breadth and also the depth of your security framework. So HITRUST offers you 3 different frameworks that you can approach. There's an E1, which is really the essentials of HITRUST. It's focused on the foundational controls in your organization, really low threats that are coming to you. There's a middle of the road assessment called the I1, and that's what they call a moderate level of assurance from the safeguarding of information, active cyber threats, and really kind of expanding the breadth of the security controls that we cover. And then the last one is a more comprehensive, and I should say most comprehensive, focusing on significant risks from the outside and really the comprehensive list of controls, and that's called the R2. So a HITRUST is focused, again, you can kind of expand or contract on the 3 different assessments, but it's E1, I1, and then R2, and it's focused really just on the holistic idea of safeguarding your company's data. And then the last one there is SOC 2. And as we've mentioned before in the onset of this presentation, SOC 2 is really the essential foundation of a security posture in the United States. So SOC 2 is specific related to the protection of data. And I mentioned related to HIPAA, the transmission, the whole life cycle of your data and your security around it. So the transmission, the storage, and the processing of data. SOC 2 has 5 different trust service criteria. Security is required, but once you approach the SOC 2, you have the ability to add 4 different ones: availability, confidentiality, processing integrity, and privacy. So for whatever reason or whatever purpose your company is using data, or whatever really you're offering your users, that's a good way to kind of understand what service criteria you need. If you are actively processing information and giving an output that a user is trusting and using for their own purposes, processing integrity would be great. If you're focused on information that is, I mentioned this acronym earlier, PII, personal identifiable information, adding privacy would be great for that. So it's a little bit of a customizable approach with a SOC 2, but it also, at the very end of the day, it's a great foundation to add to other frameworks. So back to you, Kevin. We offer those here in the SOC group, but back to you to advance our slides on the next one.
Thank you, George. And there's a question just came through. Can you please explain about the new framework ISO 42001? Is it implemented in the US AI company? How do you assess it? Is it necessary as a complement for ISO 27001? So a slight colory here at the moment. So it isn't on this slide because it's not specifically an A or a US certification or US requirement. It really has started from an ISO perspective, which is traditionally a European perspective. We are in a lucky position that we have issued about a quarter of all ISO 42001 certifications globally so far, including, for example, Synthesia in the UK, one of the leading AI video companies. They were our certification body or certification partner in September of last year, to give you an idea of how long we've been working on ISO 42001. It is not a requirement to do it. It's very much a nice to have right now. But as the EU-AI Act comes into force in August of next year, more and more people are looking at ISO 42001 as a way to demonstrate adherence towards the EOA Act, as well as being forced by their larger companies that they work with to do it as a requirement to do business with them. So a lot of the major companies that are out there are already ISO 42001 certified. An important note here is all ISO 42001 certifications today are excluding UCAS. UCAS isn't issuing certifications yet. We will be among the UCAS issuers if and when that gets issued in the coming months. We currently work with ANAB as the accreditation body that we work with for ISO 42001. They are the two biggest ISO certification bodies in the world, and we will have ISO 42001 certifications across both. It overlaps with 27001. The way I describe it is it's the same skeleton, a different skin. So a lot of the same capabilities are within it, but it's looking at it from an AI lens. But the reason it's not in here is because it's not specifically a US requirement or a US regulation.
And
when we're talking
to that,
sorry,
Kevin, just to, like you said, add to that, that was great. For Mehdi's question, to your point, is it necessary for 27001? No, it's not. But to your point, it can build on that. ISO 27001, I don't know how familiar you are with it if you're asking that question, but it's more focused on the information security management system, where the AI, ISO 42001 is focused on the AI management system. So there's definitely overlap. There's a foundation of the 27001 that you can use on 42001, but the 42001 is more focused around the management system around the AI usage, more focused on the development, the implementation of the AI, and also not necessarily the actual ability for the AI to process whatever you're looking at. So we actually, in the SOC group, have a service offering that is testing the output of AI. We can get into that. Feel free to reach out for more information on that. But 42001 is just more focused on the management of the AI and promoting that ethical usage of it.
Thank you for that, Eric. Now back to the fun and games of SOC 2. So for the international audience, so SOC 2, the correlation would be for ISAE 3000, and similarly SOC 1 would be ISAE 3402 would be the correlation from an international perspective. But SOC 2 in particular is very much the sought after requirement from a US business perspective. When we look at what exactly, let me step to the next slide. What exactly it is, as Eric already mentioned, there are 5 trust service criteria. Security is mandated, must be done. What we see is that in general, once again, it's a general rule, most companies would go for security, availability, and confidentiality. They would be the top 3 that people would look at as the triad. If you have high levels of personally identifiable information, that's where privacy and process integrity would usually come into it as well. So people can pick and choose which trust service criteria they look for. Oftentimes companies ask us, well, what should we use? The reality is it doesn't matter to us. What matters is the companies trying to sell to in the US, what are they expecting you to have? How are they expecting you to demonstrate your capabilities within your SOC 2 report? That's where all that comes from. The benefits, in a similar way to ISO 27001, it demonstrates that you have a significant level of cybersecurity awareness and capabilities internally. A big difference is ISO 27001 is a certification. SOC 2 report is a 50 to 150 page document that goes through the nuts and bolts of your entire process. It's a much more in-depth and rigorous process from that perspective. So there's a lot of focus on the depth and the quality of that depth that's involved in that, to make sure that obviously you're meeting the criteria that people are expecting to have within those reports. So in the US, every major US company will have their own SOC 2 reports today. So they have an expectation in their own head of what they're looking for and why, and what is expected to be in your SOC 2 report as well. So this is something which a lot of people find a little bit difficult or a little bit challenging in comparison to ISO 27001, which is very rigid. SOC 2 is a lot more malleable. You can pick and choose certain trust service criteria to include, and then different auditors include different levels of assessments, let's call it. We set the bar for SOC 2. We issue more SOC 2 attestations than anybody else in the world. So we make sure to meet the quality expectations of our clients and of their clients as well. There are differences in approaches with different auditors out there, but we very much focus on the quality aspect and making sure that these reports do not get rejected by the end clients and the end users. Eric, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, adding a little color there, you had mentioned something that I think is important to point out and expand on a little bit related to the ISO certification and a SOC 2 report. So a SOC 2 is an attestation. So a lot of either new clients or some clients that are not as familiar with it, if they're coming to it, approaching a SOC 2, they're either doing it for the first time on their own or related to kind of like what we mentioned earlier, they're having a client or a user push them to get a SOC 2. They get that report out the door and their first question is, did they pass the SOC 2? So like Kevin mentioned, you can't necessarily pass a SOC 2. You're not going to get a certification that you're compliant with a SOC 2 framework. But what you get is that report that states from our perspective as the SOC 2 issuer, as a CPA firm, that we, in our opinion, think that your representation of your system and your environment is accurate. And then we also lay out the results of the testing. So we will say this was the control in place to cover the security trust service criteria. Here's the results of those tests. And that report is then given to your users and your clients, and they can review it. They understand how the system, how the security information flows through the system. It's what we call a system description. So as Kevin mentioned, it's very detailed in terms of what is in your company, how you process and transmit data, and then ultimately the results of those tests. So there's various sort of grades, if you will, of a report, but not necessarily a pass-fail thing, but it does show the kind of the security environment and the results of the tests that you've put forth with all those trust service criteria. So that's one big thing. As we approach a SOC 2, I think it's important to, like Kevin said, it's malleable, it's changeable, and you can add any of those trust service criteria that you see fit. It's more than perfectly fine to start out with security, but if you are getting pushed by a client, I think it's important to understand what they would like to see as well. So like I said, you can't necessarily pass and fail, but if a client is using your system for, like I mentioned, processing some sort of data, or if they're very concerned with that personal information and that storage and protection of that PII, and you don't have privacy or processing integrity, they can still use the report, but it just might not fit their needs. So I think it's important as you begin your SOC 2 journey to identify those needs from not only your system and your side of things, but your customers and your clients as well.
Thank you, Eric. So as you can tell, this is a bit annoying because there's similarities to ISO 27001, but there's clear differences as well. And there's a question which we'll go through from Andy in a few minutes as part of this too. But for the majority of clients that are international clients, so in EMEA or APAC, a lot of them will have ISO 27001 as a precursor before looking at something like SOC 2. So what should not be happening is you should not look at SOC 2 as a completely brand new project that has to start on its own, that is a separate set of capabilities and requirements to everything else they've done before. If you're doing that, you're adding work, you're adding burden onto your desk, which you really shouldn't be doing. And the reason for that is no matter what regulation, attestation, certification is out there today, none of them are independent. There's always some level of overlap between the different frameworks that are out there. And the good news is, from an ISO 27001 and SOC 2 perspective, that overlap is pretty significant. So if you're looking at having ISO 27000, SOC 2 today, and you're adding on ISO 27001, you have about 43% of what you need for 27001. If you flip that around, and you have ISO 27001 to start with, and then you're looking to add SOC 2, that percentage is even higher. It depends on the trust service criteria you choose. It depends on the depth of the frameworks that you're looking at, but it's usually somewhere between 50 and 60% of an overlap in terms of the evidence that you'd look to have across both of those. If you're looking at SOC 1, and SOC 2. SOC 1 being the stuff which impacts your financial statements, and SOC 2 being everything else. If you're just looking at the business, the IT general controls, SOC 1 and SOC 2 are a perfect overlap. If you're adding in business controls, there is obviously a difference there. And as you can see from a HIPAA perspective, it's a significant overlap as well. So what you shouldn't be doing is looking at each of these different frameworks and certifications in isolation, because they're not. The reality is, where we spend an awful lot of our time with clients on is consolidating the frameworks together into a master audit plan that allows them to do more with less. So if you just peel back the layers and just look at, we have ISO 27001 today, we're looking to do SOC 2. What should we do, or how should we do it? Well, when is your certification? When is that audit period? What we can do is just overlap SOC 2 on the same audit period. And for those, let's say 60% of overlapping pieces of evidence, they're looked at twice by our audit team. And then they're used, once by our audit team and then used twice. If there's a conversation that needs to happen with a controller, let's say a head of IT, and for both SOC and for ISO, our SOC and ISO auditors would have that conversation once. So it'd be one conversation for the head of IT, and we would then go back and then complete the documentation on both sides. So there's no need for duplication of work. There's no need for duplication of evidence. It's the same thing over and over again. So why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's about making sure we condense things as much as possibly can. We're also in a lucky position that, to my knowledge, and I haven't found somebody else yet, we are the only audit firm in the world that issues ISO 27001 under UCAS for the UK government, as well as SOC 2 together in the same company. A lot of companies will do ISO 27001 using ANAP, but obviously if you want to do business with the UK government, the expectation is that you have UCAS certification as well. So we do both of that. We have both of that from a compliance perspective, but also probably more importantly internally from a capabilities perspective, we can offer that for clients as well. Eric?
Yeah, Kevin, great points there. And to kind of build on the question between the difference ISO 27001 and SOC 2, there's a huge amount of similarities. The main one or two I would point out is on top of that overlap of evidence that Kevin was kind of pointing out, ISO 27001 definitely more prescriptive than a SOC 2. So an ISO 27001 will have specific requirements, documentation, controls that you have to adhere to. They do certify you that on those things, and they issue a certification that says you are compliant with these items related to the ISMS. A SOC 2 does have that kind of prescriptive feel, but it's much more flexible and malleable, to continue to use, to Kevin's wording earlier. A SOC 2 does have its requirements. It has its trust service criteria. Within those, it has its points of focus. So definitely things they want to see related to change management controls, to disaster recovery controls, to entity level controls. However, the flexibility of the SOC 2 is really kind of what's different from the ISO. So it is a little bit more expansive, but it offers you an ability as a company to define how you protect data in a certain way. So if a control you do this way, that's fine. We write a control that way. We test it against how your procedures and how your policies state that you do things. Whereas an ISO 27001 for their controls and their kind of descriptions of items for security, you kind of have to adhere to their guidelines. So the flexibility and really the expansion of controls and to be able to show that you are approaching different areas and different kind of ideas of safeguards from the SOC 2 perspective is definitely what's different there for the most part.
Thank you, Derek. I suppose if we look at then barriers to entry and what's prohibiting people, what's stopping people from being able to do this today, a big part of this is just knowledge and awareness. It's a new market. It's a new set of frameworks. It's a new set of clients that you're looking to try and sell to. So having that added complication on top of the burdens of meeting current EU regulations, meeting current international frameworks, business requirements, everything else, it's another layer. It's another add-on that makes it more complicated for clients. Where we as a company can help in that regard is that we are US headquartered. But as you can probably tell from the accent, I'm not American. I'm based in Ireland. We have a large European presence. We've about 100 auditors here in Europe. We have another big audit team in Asia as well. So we have that level of capabilities outside of the US, while being able to leverage the expertise that we have in the US as well to help clients who want to understand and want to just forecast and future-proof themselves against frameworks that they may want to work towards when you're looking towards 2026 or later on. These are the businesses that we want to go after. These are the geos we want to go after. These are industries we want to go after. What do we need to do to try and help make sure that we meet their obligations and reduce the with them? That's a very, very big part of what we spend our time with our clients doing, is helping them to understand how other companies similar to themselves are using us and are working with those as well. As you do that, the world gets more and more complex. So doing ISO 27001, it's annoying, it's a burden, but it's one thing. As you start layering on more and more frameworks and more different locations, that complication, that audit complexity becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, which brings back to the consolidation piece. Trying to reduce your duplication of efforts is a huge thing. But we spend a lot of time with our clients working on a master audit plan or a map where we can demonstrate to them, if you might be doing this today in a bit of a haphazard way because nobody's perfect. This isn't what people have done historically. Just added on frameworks as it went. But if you consolidate them in a specific timeline where when the mapping of evidence overlaps in the best possible way, you can reduce your time to market very, very quickly. You can reduce the amount of hours, man hours, people that are dedicated to working on really rudimentary jobs that they shouldn't be doing, and free up their time to do stuff which is more revenue generating, more important for the company in general. So that audit complexity comes with it because you want to work within a new market or a new industry, but it can also be reduced if you do it in an intelligent way and try and consolidate together the different frameworks. Easier said than done, but we have about 6,000 clients and we do this on a daily basis, so we can certainly help in that regard.
Right.
Now, Eric, this is something you spend a lot of your time on, choosing the right audit partners. So we obviously have a lot of clients ourselves. We have inherited a lot of clients in the past from various different auditing firms that people may or may not have been happy with for different reasons. So from your own view, why do you think people choose an international audit partner? And more specifically, why do you see people choosing A-LIGN?
Well, that's a great question, Kevin, and probably very appropriate for this presentation. So let's go back to kind of the idea of those barriers to entry as a reason to look at A-LIGN as a partner internationally. So obviously in 2025, we do business all across the world, right? For the most part. So using a partner like A-LIGN is important for various reasons. Related to the barrier of entry that you mentioned, internally, let's start there. There's a lot of evidence requirements. There's a lot of time needed from the industry company and the person that is going through the SOC 2, that's going through the HIPAA or the ISO attestation, or the ISO certification. We are aware of that. As Kevin mentioned earlier, there's going to be requests and sample requests and documentation all across the board for each and every one of those certifications, attestations, whatever product you're going through. A-LIGN does a great job of trying to bring all of the groups together and have a harmonization approach to those audits. So if we do have an ISO 27001 coupled with the SOC 2, what we do is we have internal management teams and internal audit teams that come together, have conducted field work at the same time, have walkthroughs and discussions at the same time. As best as we can, we select evidence and populations and samples that apply to both set of controls and both set of frameworks. So that's a barrier to entry related to time. We try to cut down on those audit requests while still maintaining the quality for those individual products that you have. So the time is reduced from a perspective of the client, which is hugely important because after all, you have your day-to-day procedures and your responsibilities day-to-day to perform. The cost is also one of those things that you can look at as a benefit to using an auditor like A-LIGN. Related to the time savings for internal purposes from the client and customer themselves, A-LIGN also saves time. We don't have to select as many samples and populations as we do if we couple those together and work together. ISO isn't doing their thing while SOC is doing another. It saves us time. It saves us the ability to go back and forth between those two. We can work together and collaborate. Another quality to look for is that international presence. Like you mentioned, Kevin, not only do we have thousands of clients, and we're the largest SOC 2 issuer in the world, so we can approach clients that are home-based in the US that have international presence, or we can have clients that are internationally based and have presence in the US. So we kind of go both ways there. Additionally, we have the ability to service clients throughout different time zones. We have international offices in EMEA in UK, Ireland, Bulgaria. We have India, Panama, US, all throughout the US. So for not only industry specific reasons, A-LIGN has that expertise. We have the time zones, the ability to service clients at any particular time throughout the world. And that really kind of shows the breadth of services as well. So I can't say we're never surprised with a situation or a company or anything like that. But for the most part, if we see something come up and there's a question from a client or a customer, we can say, oh yeah, we saw this instance in the UK, or we saw this instance in 2024, or this industry did this, whatever problem that you're facing. So for the most part, that breadth of service allows us to approach your specific audit with at least some sort of expertise and knowledge that we've done it before. Audit consolidation, we mentioned that, but also the experience, but mainly as we go and talk about the tech that we're auditing, we also have that ability to use the tech in our audits. So we have definitely internal procedures that allow us to test and maintain our quality, but do it much more efficiently. But additionally, we also are working with all of the major players with third-party GRCs. So if you are approaching a specific audit in one way, chances are we have worked with any particular partner or service client or service company that you're using. So we are able to integrate what you've already done into your current project or future project as well. So the timeliness aspect of it, we have a quick turnaround with high quality because of those reasons. And additionally, we have the ability to, once you get that ISO certification or that SOC 2 report or whatever the report you're looking for in the product you're doing, you have the ability to hold it in your hand and hold it in your email inbox and really have that comfort and trust that what you're providing a client is usable. They're going to be able to rely on it, and they are comfortable with the completeness and accuracy of that product.
Two things I'd add to that, and thank you very much for that pretty intense answer, Eric. Two things I would add up with in terms of the qualification criteria. One of the things that we do after every single audit is we send our clients a survey of how do we do, how do we rate, and we can improve on. We currently are, I think, 96% client satisfaction rating out of 100, something we keep on striving to make sure we maintain those clients. And our average tenure for clients is 7 years, which given you're a 20-year-old company, it's relatively low, but it's low because we're growing very, very fast. So like we don't really lose many clients, and we very much look to keep those clients happy as we have them. One of the things that comes up as part of that in terms of the free form text, is anything you'd like to highlight, is they all say, can we keep the same audit team we had last year? Because it keeps that consistency throughout the year, and obviously in the next audit that these people know who we are and what we do. So we do that on a standardized basis. We keep the same audit teams with the same clients, which means that throughout the year, if you've got questions, you can raise them to the same people. You don't have to go back to square one. So it's a very important part of what we do. Even though we're tech-enabled, even though we're advancing in those ways, we do believe that having that personal touch is definitely the way forward. And something else that we do as well on an annual basis is we do a cybersecurity benchmark survey. So we get about 1,000 companies globally, who answer lots of different questions for us. And one of the questions we asked was, how many of you guys are doing more than one framework? And well over 90% were doing more than one framework. So where you might be looking at ISO 27001 is where we were using things historically. The reality is it's that plus other things. Whether it is 40001, which is already asked in this call, whether it is SOC 2, HIPAA, HITRUST, CMMC, FedRAMP, you name it, there's a whole host of additional things that people have to adhere for as well. The unfortunate reality that we've seen a lot is that a lot of cybersecurity auditors out there only focus on one type of framework. So whether that's SOC 2 or whether that's ISO, so they're not really, I suppose, incentivized to explain and educate the clients the benefits of consolidation and the improvements that can make to their life for consolidation, because the next question a client will ask is, great, can you do it? And the answer is no. So it doesn't really help them very much. A lot of our time is spent educating clients on the benefit of consolidation, not just for the benefit of the team that you have in terms of the compliance team, but also as and when you want to take advantage of new sales areas of focus, whether it's geos or industries, that you don't have to go back to square one and start all over again. You can look at the set of controls that you have today and figure out what percentage of controls do I have to add on to what I already have, which might be 20, 30%, to meet this new obligation, and obviously free up a new revenue line. So it's a very, very important part of what we're seeing our clients focusing on and battling with. But it's something, as Eric said, we've done a lot of in the past.
And one more thing, Kevin, too, sorry to interject, but you'd mentioned it, like you said, discussing with clients on that overlap. Let's assume that you don't have any security posture currently in place. Maybe you're a new company, maybe you're coming in and this is your endeavor from your management. I think, obviously to sell A-LIGN services, but really just for any service partner that you're looking for, it's important. What A-LIGN does well too is we get you ready for that audit. So if you're doing a SOC 2 or ISO or whatever the case may be, and you're adding something else, definitely important to understand that overlap. What can we use and what can we look at that you're already doing that can help? But if you're approaching a SOC 2 for the first time, or a SOC 1, or really anything in the US market, A-LIGN is going to walk you through that. And we have various options to do it. We can have a conversation, email, phone call, a scoping call to understand your systems. We also have the good thing about a SOC 2, and this is not even just exclusive to A-LIGN, but a SOC 2 and SOC 1 have different types. So a SOC 2, we can test for a whole review period of a year. Or if you don't feel comfortable with that, we can do a type 1, which is just a control design test. But even before that, what A-LIGN offers is readiness assessments and walkthroughs to get you ready for that assessment. And I think that's very important, because with anything new, you all are going to have questions. How do you approach audits? What do you need in terms of documentation? We're doing this process already, but maybe it's not documented, or maybe we have to tweak it one way, this way, or that way to be compliant with that specific control. So A-LIGN does a very good job of having that readiness assessment and those initial walkthroughs. So when we get to that assessment and the actual SOC 2 or like I said, ISO, whatever the case may be, you're ready, you feel comfortable, your process owners and your people feel comfortable with their documentation and their procedures, at that point, the audit is hopefully a cakewalk and very easy to conclude.
Thank you, Eric. We've gone through an awful lot of stuff here today. There's a lot to digest. We do have a white paper that focuses specifically on this topic as well, which we'll send you, and it'll be in this chat as well. So feel free to take that, peruse it at your leisure. Obviously, we'll here to answer any questions you might have as well. We've tried to answer questions during the webinar, so we don't have to obviously wait until the very end for everybody. But if there are questions people have, feel free to post them. We'll answer them as we go. We've just, I think, posted the white paper there now, so you can download that and have a look at it at your leisure. But if there are any other questions, feel free to let us know. But myself and Eric will be available afterwards as well, in case people want to send through things one-on-one. But in the meantime, we're pretty much at time. So thank you very, very much, everybody, for attending. Hopefully you found this useful. If you do have ideas for future webinars, if you do have insights on this webinar, feel free to send those through as well. I would be happy to take those on board. Eric, thank you very much for joining. Very much appreciate it. And thanks for your company.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
All right. Thanks all. Bye now.